Hi, my name is Vanessa. I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date's October 8th, 2017. I'm going to try to look at the camera today because in my other videos, as I'm editing them, and this one's not going to be edited, I notice that I do that. Just look everywhere except for the camera. So here we go. I want to talk today about working with others. People think that like doing the 12 steps is like being in recovery, right? And like learning what the problem is, bringing God into your life, doing the prayer meditation, doing the um uh inventories, making your amends, like just like knowing what the steps are and having gone through them once, that means like that you're now like immune to alcoholism or addiction. And like now, and like that's not the case. That's not what it actually means. You are taught how to do all of the steps so that you can take someone else through the steps. Being in recovery means um and working the program means, yes, you take everything that you've just learned and incorporate it and make sure that you practice it in all of your affairs. But it also means that you are taking someone else through that work and having an experience, sharing the experience that you've had with them so that they also can have the experience. When I start to work with sponsees, one of the conditions for me to work with someone is that they need to commit to working with people when they are done with the work. Because this is not a program to be kept to yourself. Like, you are supposed to go out and spread the word. And every once in a while, I'll check in on my sponsees who completed the work with me and be like, hey, how's your sponsoring going? And I can assure you, they don't like that text sometimes because sometimes they're not sponsoring. And sometimes they are, and it's lovely. And I'm like, cool, it's just cool to think that like something that I've experienced with someone is now being passed on to somebody else. I think that that's really meaningful. But also it continues to perpetuate this cycle of hope, right? That we can recover and that we get to do it with each other. Um, and, I was working with a sponsee last night and we were going through, you guys, a resentment inventory, surprise, surprise. And, when we're going through like a fifth step or someone reads you the resentment inventory, or, I'm there to witness it. I'm there to hear it. I'm there so that it's me, them, and God. They're kind of like, it's kind of like a confession, if you will. And part of that process sometimes is like, especially after you've done it for a while, or especially after you've completed a few resentments and actually heard like feedback from a sponsor or from friends or whatever, is that you really begin to like learn to distill the truth a lot faster. And so it's like someone can say, well, I'm afraid of not being good enough, and it's like, is the actual fear that you're unworthy of being good enough? Is the actual fear that someone else is better than you? Is the actual fear that, whatever it is. And it's like being able to get to the truthiest truth in the fastest time possible, with the fewest words, honestly. Like, it doesn't need to be this long story. It's just, is this true or is this false? And it does come with some time. And so when my sponsee was going through her resentments, and I was like, is that all of it, or is it also this, or is it this? And she'd be like, damn, you're so good at this. Like, I can never do this, like, how do you know that that's actually truer than what I wrote? Like, it's so spot on. And it's like, girl, we are talking about resentments here. Like, if there's anybody more equipped to help another alcoholic or addict with their resentments, it's another alcoholic and addict with resentments. It's like, I have experience with this. There is no education level to this. It is like, what is my experience with this book and the 12 steps and my alcoholism and my recovery? That is all that you're doing when you're sponsoring someone, is you're sharing your experience, strength, and hope. And so, in some of that experience is the experience of the ego and the painful part of the ego, right? So it's like, oh, do you really think that, your mom is a snob, or do you actually just think that she's lazy? You know, and it's like, oh, is it true that you think that he love somebody else, or is it that you yourself will never be lovable, and it's just like being able to really distill someone's, and it's not that, because sometimes there's also like a plateau, like I can only get to my own honesty. I can only get so deep in my own honesty. I need somebody else who has experienced, and even not experienced, but who can put themselves in my position to be like, I hear what you're saying. I think that you can go deeper. And I think that the actual freedom lies in this other lie that you're telling yourself about this resentment. And it's like, oh man, and sometimes it hurts, right? And sometimes it's embarrassing, and sometimes, but in this way that's like enlightening. It's like, oh my gosh, that is what the actual problem is. And it's like, again, like flashing the light underneath your bed and finding the monster, and his name is Bob. And it's just like, oh, that's not so bad. Okay, Bob, it's cool. Like, he's just like this goofy little guy under there. And you're like, that's not a real monster. It's going to actually cause me any real damage now that I have some perspective on this whole situation, right? And it's so helpful to say some of these things out loud to another person who has also experienced something similar, because then you can actually hear it and be like, that sounds ridiculous. I can't believe that this is the entire reason that I've been like ruining my life or whatever, right? And the whole point of working with somebody is like, yes, to like share their experience, or sorry, to share your experience with them and to like help them so that they can also learn how to pick up the tools that have helped you and also incorporate that into their life. And then they can also share the message. But something that I think that we also forget to like talk about is that sponsees are a reflection of ourselves, right? So it's like, especially I catch myself and like, just gonna say this right now. And I do tell my sponsees this, so it's not like a big secret. But it's like sometimes I'm turning on the Zoom or I'm driving to go meet them, and I'm like, this is the last thing that I want to do right now. I could be taking a nap. I could be watching TV. I can be scrolling on my phone. I can be, whatever it is. I can be doing anything else, but like having to sit across from another woman and hear about her alcoholism, right? And like that's typically how it is, like before I sit down across from the woman. And and then I hear what she's going through, or she reads her questions to me, or I reread a transcription in our books, and I'm just like, oh, like all of this is hitting. And then it never has failed me where I will, end a session with a sponsee and we walk away from each other. I turn off the Zoom, I whatever. And I'm just like, I'm so blessed that I got to do that. And I mean like blessed, like it is a privilege that I am even alive to talk to somebody else sober about their disease, their dis-ease, their spiritual malady, their physical craving that they get when they start to pick up and use, the mental obsession, that weird mental blank spot before we pick up when from a state of being stone cold sober, right? And it's just like, oh my God, like it's so cool. It's like we get to talk about all these things on a completely different level, and this different level of consciousness, almost of being completely awakened to what this state of addiction is, right? And it is amazing because I get to be like, oh yeah. And sometimes women will start to share their experience and they'll start to get like maybe embarrassed, or they feel some shame around that. And maybe I'm the only person who they've ever told this stuff to, right? And it's like, I take that very seriously. And it's an extremely like sacred relationship that we get to have with each other. But it's also a relationship that I stress to them is not a relationship of like me being here and them being here. Like I'm the teacher and they're like, it is not like that. It is actually, we are both very much learning from each other. And I get to hear about other women's experiences, and I get to learn from their experiences, and I get to see the resilience and the spirit of God in them. And I'm so sorry. And actually, I'm not sorry if that sounds really like esoteric or just like super churchy and evangelical or something, but it is the truth. And I would not be here sober. I would not be here happy. I would not be here enlightened in some sense, awakened, aware, content, at peace, without that this very crucial element of the book, which is to help others. Because every time that I go through a round with somebody, there's like this spiral up that starts to happen, right? And it's just like I'll get to like, I don't know, it's almost like an ascension, basically. And it is through and actually I wanted to read this part of the book because it was brought up at a meeting tonight that I went to, which is so powerful. And I love what he shared about it. So first of all, faith without works is dead. We have to work at it. And, you know, for the alcoholic who fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. And I can affirm that sponsoring and working with another woman, knowing that I was going to have to listen to someone's fifth step, knowing that I was going to have to tell someone how to write a resentment inventory, asking somebody if they're agnostic, you know, asking them if they finished their amend, whatever it is, asking if they've done their prayer meditation, that relationship has been able to carry, and it's not the specific relationships, but that type of relationship, that type of responsibility in a sense, that type of commitment, honestly, that I have and that I share on the spiritual basis has gotten me through some of the most difficult, griefiest, devastating times that I have ever experienced in sobriety. And it has gotten me through that in ways that I will not ever be able to understand all the way. Like on a molecular level, I just felt carried through. And there was, you know, again, I did stop sponsoring for 1 year after I lost my third sponsee. And you can watch more about that on another video where I talk about making a victim impact statement for a sponsee who overdosed on fentanyl. You can check out that other video. If I figure out how to link it or whatever, I'll do that. But definitely go check that out because it's a story worth knowing about. Hers is a life worth hearing about. But you know, after that, after Faith died, I did stop sponsoring for about a year. And I moved and I did all this stuff. And, you know, it's only really by the grace of God that I'm even still sober. And not that I was like really super engaging in anything, like I was just so stuck in self. I was just so stuck in self. And then I kind of slithered my way into like this comedy community and you know, it's funny how I began to, because what I had found in the AA community is that I just got kind of sick of constantly being asked for help. And I got sick of it because I didn't know how to ask for help. And so then I was like, well, I'm getting, and it was really frustrating to then put myself out there and help people just for them to die anyway, or just for them to relapse anyway, or just for them to whatever, you know? And so it was really just like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And so I kind of stepped away from AA in general. I was just like, nope, I'm good. And kind of in a way, like the spiritual aspect, but I don't know. I don't know. I definitely turned my back to it, just being fully aware that it was still there, but not really engaging with it, right? And so then I got involved in this comedy community here in San Diego, and wouldn't you know that I began to recognize similar patterns in this community of comics, super similar but you know, that spiritual malady exists inside and outside of the rooms of AA. It is just our human condition. And I found myself in another position of, you know, people coming to me again for help. And at that time, it was really like a welcome, you know, experience for me to help people who were outside of the rooms of AA. But then I found myself realizing that like, oh, the way that I help people isn't going to work here. Because when they're not typically facing life or death consequences like we do with addiction. Two, they're not always necessarily open to a spiritual solution because their life is not on the line. And three, um, I think people are just not always really ready for a solution or even willing to want to be conscious or aware of what maybe their actual problem is, which is a problem of perception, right? Where the self is like the center of the universe. And so I found myself like, oh, okay, this is actually, I'm just repeating patterns here, it turns out. And so that's when I stepped back into sponsoring because I was like, oh, I'm gonna get really burnt out just dealing with comics who don't want help actually. So I'm gonna find and then just like that, a sponsee materialized. And it's almost like God knew that I needed a sponsee, and there she was. And I was like, perfect timing, let's do this. And yeah, she'll actually be finishing up in a couple weeks now, but um it's an absolute gift. It's an absolute blessing to be able to work with people and to share what has so freely been given to me that has changed my life on a basis that I know I alone was incapable of. And I know that I was incapable of it because my past life experience has shown me that. All of the times in my addiction, or even when I was a dry drunk trying to get my life together, I was incapable of pulling it off. And I'm a very capable person, but I just couldn't produce that deep spiritual, effective change that kind of reorganized everything inside of me in order to pull off a different way of experiencing this lifetime. So I just felt really called to share that because I found the topic super inspiring, and it is one of the biggest, and honestly, that's part of why this channel even exists, because I know that I'm never going to be able to, this is a real part, this is part of it. I know that I will never be able to help the amount of people that I feel I need to help to show God how grateful I am for the life that I have now. Even though some people might look at my life and be like, it's not all that great. Trust me, internally, it's a lot better than it ever was or ever has been. So I just continue to want to share this message, and I hope inspire hope in other people that their life can be different too. And if you're here along for the journey, I'm happy for you, because that means that maybe you're open to helping someone else in the future too. So, all right, that's all I got. I love you, and I hope that you have a good rest of your whatever. And I hope all your favorite bands stay together. Okay.